parks today. Now, that's the first step in Governor Greg Abbott's plan to gradually get things back to normal there. But protesters in Austin are demanding even faster action, while others worry the state's low testing level may cause the virus to rebound. To catch us up on all of this, Casey Stegall is live in Arlington, Texas with more. Casey?
Dana, good to see you. Yeah, the reopening process is really going to be happening across a schedule to be outlined by the governor, with the exception of schools. As you know, those are going to remain closed for the remainder of the academic year. But starting on Wednesday, elective surgeries, they will be allowed to move forward again. Those procedures were initially put on hold, as you know, to keep hospital resources, supplies, and beds free. Then Friday, retailers can open, providing they operate on a retail to-go capacity. That means customers can make purchases ahead of time, then drive to the store and have their orders delivered to their car. And then 1 week from today, next Monday, the next rounds will be announced, which could include opening restaurants in a limited capacity. Now, in tandem to these openings, state health officials continue working on ways to increase community testing in Texas and develop contract tracing programs, since Texas does rank behind many other states when it comes to overall testing numbers. And speaking of new numbers, we have some just in. Dana, now more than 19,000 people have tested positive for coronavirus across Texas. 495 people have lost their lives. Back to you.
All right, Casey Stegall in Texas for us. Thank you. Now let's go a little further east. Beaches in Jacksonville, Florida, reopening this weekend with time restrictions. Only activities like walking, running, fishing, and surfing are allowed, and police were on hand to encourage social distancing. Let's bring in Jacksonville Mayor Lenny Curry. Mr. Mayor, how do you think it went this weekend?
I think people behaved responsibly. I got reports from our fire and rescue and our police officers that people came out with their families and they kept their distance and they walked and they kept moving. They did what we asked of them.
And so after this, do you think that you can take additional steps to reopen more? Like, what would be the next thing that you would like to try to reopen?
Yeah, well, we want to get people back to work, but we've got to be responsible about it. We were one of the first cities in the state. I moved and shut down events before many other cities did, and took some criticism for that. So when you make these decisions, there's going to be some people that question you. Opening the beaches was one small step, one small responsible step, opening with restrictions, and another group of steps that will come to getting people back to work. We're going to have to be able to test people. Right now, there's a study out that says you need about 1,500 tests per day for a city of our population size. We're doing that some days right now, so we're going to continue to work to expand testing. We're following President Trump's plan. We're working with Governor DeSantis to make sure that we can responsibly and safely get people back to work as quickly as possible. And, I'm going to lead on the issue and get people back to some sense of normalcy as quick as they can.
For other mayors that are thinking about how they might be able to, maybe reopen parks, or if they have beaches, what is the metric that you looked at that gave you the confidence to be able to do that?
Well, there's a couple of things. Our percent of positives have been trending around 5% for quite some time now, which is significantly lower than other major metropolitan areas. But the other piece of this is through our safer at home orders, we've encouraged people to get out, walk, exercise in their neighborhoods, walk their dogs. Just don't stop and talk to your neighbor. Don't get in their space. So this was just opening up more access for the beaches, more access to the parks. I would say to other mayors and other folks in leadership, though, this virus is going to be with us for a while. So any medical expert would tell you the safest thing you can do without a vaccine is to be in your home. I understand that. If I were a physician, I'd say the same thing. But we can't be in our homes for another 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. It's not sustainable economically, and it's not sustainable for a whole slew of other health effects on citizens.
And Mr. Mayor, I do want to point out something that was quite remarkable, that you did have officers that were out there, and yesterday they were able to capture a fugitive from justice and arrest him. He was wanted in Arnold, Pennsylvania for homicide. So a good deed being done there. Last word to you.
Absolutely. Yeah, look, I'll speak to the citizens of Jacksonville and to other folks in leadership. We know this virus is going to be with us for a period of time. We understand that to the extent you can socially distance, you need to, and being at home is the safest place. But we've got to get people back to work. We've got to do it responsibly. We've got to be disciplined and serious about social distancing, wear masks when you're in grocery stores, and let's just all take care of each other.
Let's do that indeed. All right, Mr. Curry, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
The Trump administration is close to making a deal with Congress to save small businesses. That'll be very welcome news for many people out there. The details are next. Plus, Jerry Willis is on deck, and she will answer some of your pressing financial questions after the break.
Of this crisis, all sort of coming back online, all pretty determined to get the wheels of commerce moving just a little bit here. Where's the pushback coming from? Is it really just the scientists kind of saying, Bill Gates, kind of, those types saying, hey, just keep us shut down for 18 months, 24 months. It's the better part of valor. This thing will be completely gone. We'll have a vaccine. And whatever the economic damage is, we'll try to pick up the pieces.
Well, you look at, you were covering in earlier segments about literally negative oil prices. We do not have a way of life that functions without a pricing mechanism. If there's no demand side, if there's no buy side, there's no price signals. Our whole economy is very interdependent. And I think that's the piece that's coming back in part due to this essential versus non-essential, not just the restrictions on freedom, but the irrational restrictions, and say, look, if you can operate this business, if I can follow these rules, why can't I operate my business and have my livelihood and take care of my family and my neighbors? And so I think that's part of the pushback. And you do see around the world, just like you saw around the world, some places closing first, you are seeing other places open. So I think a lot of people in America want to push this against Donald Trump narrative. And the reality is it's a broad bipartisan sense that there does have to be a way to operate more of our economy, and certainly gradually and safely, but soon.
Congressman, thank you very, very much. We really appreciate you spending the time with us on this delicate balance, but we've got to come to some decisions here. Thank you very much. In the meantime, folks, oil, it's about to close in a few moments. And I want to go to Stephen Schwartz of the Schwartz Report, one of my favorite oil experts. Stephen, here's the thing. So we got the last inventory number. We're at 503 million barrels without the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, 634 with it. And that's the most we've had in a long time, but we've had a lot more. You go back to June of 2017, 502 million, even more with the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. So why this down 300? Why has the dam broken today of all days?
Well, clearly, Charles, we've been in a structural bear market now for the better part of the month, following the debacle of the OPEC meeting back in early March. So we have a situation where the forward curve has just collapsed. It was collapsing before this. So, for instance, Charles, you could buy oil at some point over the last month and sell it 12 months out and guarantee yourself a 20, 30, 40% return. So what has happened, Charles, over the last 4 weeks is every bit of available storage capacity, commercial storage capacity, is in the process of being maxed out. So sooner rather than later, you're not going to be able to store any more oil. So clearly we are producing today, even though oil production in the United States has dropped 800,000 barrels a day, it needs to drop another 1 million barrels a day just to compensate for the loss of demand destruction. So we have no demand, we are producing too much, and probably by the end of next month, if not sooner, we're not going to have any place to store this oil. So what's going to happen is you're going to have to dump it onto the market. So what we saw in particular to today was the penultimate contract, the contract for May delivery. It expires tomorrow. So clearly someone large came into the day and they still owned way too much May futures contracts, and they're stuck. They're trying to get out of the position. So right now on these prints, oil today, well, put it this way, oil on Friday settled at $18 a barrel. Today, about 10 minutes ago, it traded at negative $40. So if you're a producer, you've got to pay someone $40 a barrel to take that oil away from you. So clearly someone major just blew up today. Whether it's a bank, a hedge fund, a major oil company, we are watching the death of a major entity in this market go on in front of our eyes.
And this is a great point you bring up, Stephen, because, a lot of folks have been talking about corporate debt, particularly that held by some of these oil companies, and then maybe the exposure to hedge funds. I mean, this is a slippery slope. It's not just the oil industry that's exposed right here. So we're going to be bracing, I guess, for a little bit to find out who this major player is that did indeed blow up. In the meantime, the idea now is that, A, why don't they stop producing? B, who saves this industry?
Yeah, it's going to be the majors that do survive. Some of the producers are stuck. If you're in Canada, you're landlocked. You don't have enough storage capacity, but it's very difficult for you to shut down your oil sands production. So the Canadians certainly are in a difficult road to hoe over the next few months, and as is the smaller producer here. Now, all of our clients, and now, Charles, as you know, our clients range from everyone pulling barrels out of the ground or natural gas out of the ground, processing it, selling it, hedge funds trading it. So we have represent a nice cross breadth of the market. And my smaller producers, they've all shut in. They shut in weeks ago. So you're starting to see it. It's just there's a lag here, and the production shut-ins are not happening fast enough to compensate for this loss of demand. So now what's going to happen, Charles, is let's not sugarcoat this. This is not a recession. This is a depression. So there are 22 million Americans that lost their job over the last 4 weeks. That translates to 15 million Americans who are not driving to work each day. The Federal Reserve of St. Louis is projected upwards of 53 million Americans unemployed in the second quarter. That translates, Charles, into 40 million of people who are not driving to work. So as far as demand goes into the summer, where we normally see a spike in demand, forget about it. It's dead on arrival. This summer is never going to happen because the demand has been killed for the foreseeable future, and we're seeing that reflected in the spot market right now.
How does it come back, though, Stephen? I mean, does there have to be major cuts? Do OPEC and Russia have to go back to
The burger chain wants the money to go to smaller businesses who need the help more. The CEO writing in a letter to the public that they were able to raise the money they needed through other means. So the company hopes to inspire more major companies to give back the money that they got. And we have other things happening here. Americans across the country are wondering what a deal on a small business loan program would mean for their wallets. We asked our viewers again this week what's on their minds as we wait for a path to reopen the economy. The Fox Business Network's Jerry Willis is here to help us answer these pressing personal financial questions. It's always wonderful to see you, Jerry, and I know people will get some relief hearing from you on questions like this one from Nick. He asked this: we got word last Friday that we had to furlough 30 employees and that the remaining 40 employees will have to take a 15% hit to keep us going. Our approved PPA forms to the bank on the first Friday we were allowed to apply, but have yet to receive a federal number, hence the furlough. His question is this: is there still a chance that we can receive the grant and get our staff back to work? Jerry, what do you think?
Hey, Dana, good to see you. Yeah, so there is a chance. I have good news and bad news. Yes, there is a chance you can get the money from the Paycheck Protection Program. I believe that's what he's describing there. This is the SBA program that lends out to companies with 500 or fewer workers, as Lawrence just described it. But here's the trick. Because you don't have that federal loan number, that tells me you're not in the first tranche of funds that was passed 2 weeks ago, but in fact, you're going to be in this next one, which is yet to pass Congress. So the money's not coming right away, but yes, you still may get it. One important note here: you're going to have the same number of employees that you had back on February 15th. Once you get the loan, 8 weeks after that date. So they don't have to be the same employees, just the same head count to give that forgiveness of the loan. Dana?
Oh, that's a good clarification on that one. So Beth Ann asked on Instagram, she said, how is this stimulus check going to impact next year's taxes? Are we going to get a statement from the government to report on our taxes? Will this also affect what refund we receive next year?
Okay, this one's easy. Nada. Nothing. This is not a taxable event. You're not going to have to pay any money on it. It's not going to reduce your refund. So good news there. I rarely say free money, but kind of free money.
I enjoy. Okay, that's good. That's a good fast answer on that one. So Mike Terrazas asked on Facebook, I heard that we may be able to borrow or withdraw without penalty against our 401ks 10 to 20%. Is that true?
Yeah. Okay. So if you are having a hard time because of coronavirus, you can borrow up to $100,000 from your 401k, your IRA, your 403b. So that's very good news indeed. You're not going to have to pay that 10% withdrawal penalty that is usually charged, and you'll be able to pay it back over 3 years. This might be a better solution for people who are having huge financial problems rather than putting your debt on credit cards or taking out a personal loan. Dana?
Mm-hmm. I'm glad he asked that question because I wondered that too. A last question, kind of in the same realm. Jay Shaken asked this: would you advise to contribute more to my 401k during the pandemic?
I absolutely would. Look, all things being equal, this is a great time to be investing in your 401k. Stocks are cheap. What do you want to do when you invest? You want to buy low and sell high, right? And that's exactly the opportunity you have right now. But a lot of people don't have any savings. So if they lose income, if somebody in the family loses a job, they may have a hard time making rent or mortgage. So I say, if you don't have any cash savings, hold on to that money. Dana?
All right. Jerry Willis, always a pleasure to have you on the show. And I think you've probably put a lot of minds at ease just now. Thank you so much. All right, the Biden and Trump campaigns, they are agreeing on something, that China misled the world in the first months of the coronavirus outbreak, but they're still attacking each other on the issue. We'll talk to our political panel about all things 2020 next.
Explore time in one respect. But in another respect, Charles, the oil companies take a long-term view all the time. Unless you're a small operator who's living, by the loan from the bank on a day-to-day basis. But if I speak from the eyes of a major oil company, if you're in a situation like this, you can't simply shut down all your wells without destroying the value of those wells. So what you do is you take it a day at a time, you prioritize, you have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, and you think about it over the next week, month, quarter, year, and you look at it over a period of time. They're not out of cash. The major oil companies are not out of cash. There still is consumption. The consumption will determine where the price goes from here. Lord knows what happened today to suddenly go into this negative value on a barrel of oil. It's utter nonsense, and it just can't continue because there still is demand. There's still cargo being hauled. There's still freight being moved. There's still there's still cars on the highway, and there's still petrochemical plants operating and people demanding product. So it's not like we're out of business. It's a bad day.
No, it's not. But John, I mean, even before coronavirus and this crazy oil war with Saudi Arabia and Russia, crude seemed to have trouble. It seemed like it just couldn't get its footing. It's felt vulnerable almost all year long, even as the economy was doing well. And many complained about just being a glut. There's just so much supply that even at maximum demand, you can't soak it all up. And certainly, even though there is, to your point, going to be some demand, it's not going to be anywhere near the max. So it's great if ExxonMobil can take a one-year view today, but there's got to be a large swath of this industry that's wondering how they're going to make it from now till Friday.
Actually, it doesn't happen overnight like that in this industry. For whatever reason, there was a price yesterday. There will be a different price tomorrow. The price is really set by traders. The oil companies themselves, unless they have a trading organization, are not directly involved in the movement of the molecules. The oil company's role is to produce the molecules, and they're going to produce them according to a capital plan that they've had locked in for a long time. The traders affect the price on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour, minute-to-minute basis, and they can't find a buyer is what's happened. They can't find anybody to buy today's oil or what the May contract coming due. Plus, there was the information in the paper today about 40 million barrels coming from Saudi to the U.S. over the next month or so. That's a huge overglut of oil, but I'm sure it's all based on prior contracts. And so I'd say that today is a temporary aberration. That's how I see it.
All right, it's one hell of an aberration. What about, speaking of Saudi Arabia and all this oil on its way? Some folks have said maybe D.C. should get involved, either stop, importing oil or put a tariff on it, pay American producers not to produce oil, put more in the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Of all of these options, which one, in your mind, makes the most sense?
Put it in the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Because we really don't want government involved, and I'm speaking from an industry perspective. We don't want government deciding how much oil is coming into the country on a given day or paying people to keep oil in the ground. That's an interference and an insertion that's just totally inappropriate. Government doesn't know how oil companies operate. They're not supposed to. And I think that's just overreach. Putting oil in a Strategic Petroleum Reserve, buying it at a low price, that's wise. That's good for the taxpayers. Why the Democrats don't approve of doing that is because of the visceral anti-oil relationship that the industry has with the Democrats. But they're shorting the American taxpayer by not buying cheap oil to put in the Strategic Reserve. It makes no sense at all from a pragmatic standpoint.
Yeah, you're 1,000% right. I got a lot of calls right before my show came on, calls and emails. People are actually looking to be opportunistic here. They want to know which contract to buy, what stocks are to buy. I looked at the balance sheet of some of these Permian Basin plays, for instance, coming into the year. Some of my favorite names like Concho and Pioneer, I think are going to be okay, but it does feel like maybe they may need some sort of help. Everyone's going to D.C. hat in hand these days because some of these smaller producers, not the really tiny ones, but the ones who've made a name for themselves, should they be bailed out at least temporarily?
I think bankruptcy is the better course, really. But bailing them out is a political question that will never get answered by this Congress, and because the inability of the Congress to make tough decisions, particularly relating to the oil industry. They'll debate it for months. Meanwhile, what are the companies going to do?
Right.
Bankruptcy protects companies.
Right.
It doesn't mean they all go belly up. It means they reorganize. I think there's too many. I've been saying for 2 years, Charles, that there's been too many operators operating with negative cash in the oil patch in the U.S. And yet the banks, until, say, the last 4 to 6 months, have been still giving them more money. The private equity folks got in to try to flip oil companies to make a lot of money. They got burned.
Trump was basically giving China a little bit of a pass during that month of January. Will that be effective for the Biden campaign, or is it just kind of difficult for them to campaign in this environment during a pandemic?
Well, it's definitely difficult to campaign a pandemic, but I think that what they're seeing is Trump is his own worst enemy. I mean, historically, Americans have given the commanders-in-chief high approval ratings during time of crisis. Your former boss, George W. Bush, was almost at 90% after 9/11, but Donald Trump's approval ratings have been dropping precipitously around his handling of this pandemic. And in fact, if you saw the NBC poll over the weekend, more Americans think Joe Biden would actually do better handling the pandemic than Trump. So Trump really is he needs a foil, and he knows that his handling of the situation is not cutting it. So he's got to sort of make it muddy the waters with the attack on Biden.
Colin, maybe let me have you talk about those poll numbers, because I actually think President Trump's numbers went up initially, but now it's like they're back to where they have been since November of 2016. Like, they're just so remarkably stable, even in the middle of all this.
Yeah, his numbers don't go too far up. They don't go too far down. I think Ty is correct in that the Biden camp wants to make this next 6.5 months a referendum on President Trump's handling of coronavirus and the subsequent steps to address it. And I think Team Trump is going to make this a choice between two really different candidates and two really different visions. And look, there's a reason that only 2 incumbents since 1932 have lost re-election. It's really hard to defeat a sitting president. And push comes to shove, most people are going to stick with the candidate they know, especially during a turbulent time. But those are the battle lines right now. And and that's where we'll see these debates being played out.
It is indeed where we'll see that. And Ty, I just have one last question for you. How come you haven't grown a beard like Colin during this quarantine?
We've actually gotten to the stage of quarantine where I'm cutting my own hair, so that's why I'm back from the camera a little bit.
I'm not there
I think
yet.
you both look great. Thanks so much for joining us. All right,
you.
see you guys next week. Up next, with large corporations and universities getting stimulus money amid the coronavirus outbreak, a social media movement takes hold, calling Congress to end what many consider corporate welfare.
Directly related to increased drug overdose deaths as well as suicides. So it is imperative that we get people back to work at an overall healthier place.
Real quick, Dr. Safire, because we had a lot of breaking news. In South Korea, not only are they going back to work, I mean, they're going on picnics. It's like but and they say it's all with this contact tracing, but they learned the lessons from the Middle East respiratory syndrome because they were the hardest hit country outside of the Middle East. They set up the infrastructure for it. How important is that, and does it infringe on our rights?
Well, South Korea, Taiwan, all of these other places, they do have PTSD from the last SARS pandemic. And so they did have contact tracing and testing right away. That is one thing that we were slow on here. But when we talk about contact tracing, do you know what they're doing? They're actually monitoring people through their cell phones and their GPS. And you have a lot of people in the United States that really believe in the right to privacy. So it's a fine balance of how are we going to contact trace people? Because if we could open up much sooner if we knew that we could test people freely who came in with symptoms and then immediately contact the people that they had been in contact with in the last several days or the last up to 5 days. If we could do that and those people all be tested and then potentially quarantined, we would be able to open up things much faster. But that debate is going to continue on, whether it's infringing on privacy or not.
Dr. Nicole Safire, the book is Make America Healthy Again. What a perfect time for a book like that. Can't wait to read it and have other folks read it as well. See you real soon. The Dow and S&P now are lower. They tried, the NASDAQ, in fact, was a little bit higher, but all these entities, equities are pulling down now, mostly because of oil, which is having a session like it's never had before. At one point, the May contract was off more than 300% rather. I want to bring in now to talk about just where we could be going with this markets, not just oil, but also equities. ER Shares CEO and CIO Joel Schulman. Joel, first, your thoughts on what happened in the oil patch today.
Well, clearly it's going to have a devastating effect for many companies. Many of these oil companies are now supporting very high promised dividend yields, but they're not going to be able to make them. And moreover, many of them are going to default because they just don't have the wherewithal to pay back their obligations. So oil is going to have a reverberating effect through the markets. There are going to be some beneficiaries who are oil buyers, but there aren't enough of those right now to really make a difference.
Energy itself, as a part of the S&P, is down 3.4%. It was up 10% on Friday. What exactly are investors looking at? Where's this disconnect and the slippery slope? Are we ignoring the sort of risky debt that a lot of these smaller independent oil companies took, the potential for this massive corporate default becoming something of a domino? Because a lot of experts have called for this for a long time, saying that the first domino with the high corporate debt, particularly some of this higher yielding, riskier debt, would be from the oil patch.
Yeah, there's no question. Many of these oil companies have been fallen angels. So for your viewers to know what these are investment grade securities that have been since fallen to junk grade. And we're feeling the spread, the difference between the treasury and the corporate issuer expand quite a bit with increasing levels of debt. And so now what we've seen, you're right, there was a very first domino in this wave. We've seen the energy companies dropping appreciably 70, 80, 90%, and many are going to default. And so we're seeing, because the balance sheets are so weak and because their debt costs are now rising, and because there's these debt obligations, these fixed income obligations coming due, many of them just won't make it. They don't have the capacity to meet their debt obligations.
Right.
They don't, and so it's going to continue to compound.
In the meantime, as we saw a lot of folks betting on oil, even though West Texas Intermediate was off on Friday, We also got word that the short positions are as large as possible. And for folks out there, this is essentially when companies, when investors are betting for stocks to go down. And yet, when it's this big, Joel, often, I mean, we've got a screen up right now. The most popular short positions, all green. And so, are you contrarian when it comes to this? That maybe there could be so much shorting because they have to buy these stocks at some point.
Well, in fact, on Friday, we bought great entrepreneurial growth company out of Boston called Wayfair, which many of your clients may know, your viewers may know. It's an online furniture sales company, and they're an $8.5 billion company. They're growing revenues by 35% per year. Now, this is a company that has about 24 million shares short, and they only trade about 4.5 million shares per day, so it takes about 6 days plus for the shorts to cover. What that means is that, you know, if any news comes out that's at all favorable for this company, the stock is going to go up, and then the shorts have to cover, and that's what creates the short squeeze. And so this is if your viewers are looking at percentage of shares outstanding that are short, this is one of the highest percentage companies out there. It's got about 41.7% outstanding shares that are short. It takes over 6 days to cover. So with the work from home movement that's going on, the high revenue growth rate, the fact that the founders both own about 1.2 billion in stock and aren't selling it, I mean, they're holding about 25%. So this is
and to your point, Wayfair is one of the biggest winners today at 49% short. There have been a lot of short squeezes in this stock in the past, and you're absolutely right. I think everyone should make a list of these names. In the meantime, I do also want to bring into the conversation Cheryl Casoni. Cheryl, equity is holding up pretty good, considering the just carnage that we're seeing in oil.
Yeah, and you know it's funny because I think you mentioned this earlier that when the market really started to go south, end of February, beginning of March, it was
century of the food bank, but on Twitter we do it quicker, faster than ever before. Dana, it's Americans coming together to help other Americans. And my message to Congress, I think the President Trump is correct. Congress needs to get on the plane and they need to get off their you-know-what, where they eat healthy, they eat very good food, and they need to pass relief funding so Americans can eat. I mean, the average American right now is really struggling, and that's what our whole movement is about. We raised $56,000 in a little over 24 hours, Dana, and our average donation was about $18, if you can believe that.
So then how do you figure out where to get that money to where the need is greatest?
People tweeted us. They do hashtag Twitter Food Bank or hashtag Bailout Humans. We've been trending #1 in the world for the last 3 days. And people tweeted us. They tell us their need. You know, it used to be they were dying of cancer. Now it's that they can't get food. So we send them food. We send them $100, and boom, technology, you can feed people in minutes.
One of the things you said yesterday in a tweet was that if you cannot give money, you can sure as heck give kindness. Both are important, and one is free. And I think we have seen that across the board. But I wanted to give you another chance maybe to talk to Congress about, you don't think $1,200 is enough for people, the people who are really suffering.
It's not.
What do you think Congress should do?
The most popular thing President Trump could do is mandate Congress come back in and pass something like Feed America or something to get people more than $1,200. Why does Harvard get $9 million, but the average American can barely even have food in some cases? This shouldn't happen. This shouldn't happen in America. And so that's what our movement is all about. And yes, we're all about kindness, but sometimes we got to give tough love, and we got to give a little tough love to Congress to help out the average American who's struggling right now.
In the last seconds that we have, can you talk to people about how it's okay to ask for help during this time? Because this is nothing that they did. It is not their fault that they need help.
No, in fact, I say, call me a beggar. I'll be a beggar. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We have to take care of people. People shouldn't have shame. We're going to get through this. We've gotten through other world wars before. This is another war. Congress is missing in action. They need to come back. We can take care of each other. That's what we're doing on Twitter, and we're going to keep doing it every day.
Bill Pulte, I've got to run. Thank you so much for all you do. We appreciate it. And thank you for joining us. I'm Dana Perino. Don't forget, I got story time at 3:30 p.m. Eastern today. And next, you're going to have a great treat. Bill Hemmer.
Dana, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Fox News Alert now. How do you reopen the country? I'm Bill Hammer, and good afternoon. The fate of the U.S. economy dominating the fight against the pandemic at this hour. And we begin in this ongoing debate over how and when to reopen America. We have seen protesters in many states calling on governors to loosen the stay-at-home orders as state leaders consider ways to safely reopen the economies there. Meanwhile, lawmakers in the Trump administration working on a bill that could top $470 billion. If passed, it would provide more relief for small businesses, among many other things. In a moment, I'll speak with Michigan Democratic Congressman Dan Kildee about both of those topics. But first, I want to get to Matt Finn reporting live from our Midwest Bureau in Chicago to get a lay of the land on this Monday afternoon. Matt, hello.
Bill, hundreds of protesters already gathered outside of the Capitol in Pennsylvania, and there are even more demonstrations nationwide today from Arizona to New York. A growing number of outraged Americans in at least 23 states are now demanding their state government reconsider some, if not all, parts of the stay-at-home orders, insisting their livelihoods are being destroyed.
It was probably a good decision at the time, but now it's clear it was a mistake. Now it's time to just flip the switch. Just flip the switch.
There's a lot of people that are hurting, not just people that are getting sick from this virus, but people that are, their entire livelihoods are being upended by this.
Many protesters in various states are blatantly disregarding social distancing guidelines while demonstrating, raising health concerns. And at a protest near Indianapolis, demonstrators held up signs saying, "Liberate Indiana," and "Hey, Governor, you and your staff are still getting paid. Wait till November." Protesters mostly want to return to their jobs and school, but also say they're outraged over certain restrictions on activities like fishing. And online petitions are gaining hundreds of thousands of signatures requesting businesses like beauty salons reopen with extra care and as little as one customer at a time. In Denver, nurses gathered to counter protest. Medical experts and even the president's task force is still urging people to practice social distancing and stay home. In Illinois, America's third largest city of Chicago has been under lockdown for nearly a month now. Illinois' governor says people's protests are legitimate, but he's looking at all the ways he can reopen while keeping people safe.
I think I would say to all of those folks who legitimately want to get back to work that I do too. I want people to get back to work. I want people to go back to school. And I want us to have a great summer.
The president has encouraged people to abide by their governor's orders, but also say some governors have gone too far. Bill.
Thank you, Matt. Ongoing debate. Clearly, Matt Finn in Chicago. I want to bring in Michigan Congressman Dan Kildee, the Democrats' Chief Deputy Whip. And, sir, good day to you, and thank you for your time. Can you understand clearly the level of frustration being directed in Lansing or various parts of the country about the stay-at-home orders today, sir?
Yeah, I definitely understand the frustration. People want to go to work. They want to get back to some semblance of normal. And so that sentiment, those protesters, the protest comes from the right place. And I think we have to be careful, those who, support some of these stay-at-home orders, we have to be careful to not miss the point that these protesters, most of them, some of them have other interests, obviously, but for the most part, these are people who are looking to get back to normal. But we need to listen to the president's task force, the experts. We need to listen to the science and health experts and make sure that as we do this, as we transition back to whatever the new normal looks like, we do so in a way that doesn't create the second spike of coronavirus. We know this may not be over right away. We just want to be thoughtful, careful, and as effective and deliberate as we can. But the most important thing is obviously protecting human life. We can make short-term sacrifices to do that, and I think that's really the struggle that we're facing right now.
Yeah, and when you consider the second wave, you could be waiting another year for that, listening to the scientists and the doctors on that and the experts. But when do you think it's okay to give the green light in Michigan?
I think it's when the testing shows that we are clearly on the other side of the peak of this, and let's hope that that's very soon. The governor's current executive order extends for another 12 days or so. We are at the peak right now of the death rate. We have seen a decline in new cases for sure, which is a positive indicator. If we see that number continue continue to go down quickly, then I do think we can begin that process. But we have to keep in mind, this is uncharted territory, and we don't get a second chance. We have to make sure to get it right. And as between moving hastily to reopen the economy or making sure that we're taking the extra precaution to protect American lives, I think, as is the case in any, global threat, we always put the premium on protecting life. There are generations that have come before us who have made big sacrifices.
I think you would also agree, if you're going to be out in public, social distancing is a must. It is proven by all standards to work. Now in Washington, with the latest round of funding, could be upwards of $500 billion we're hearing. Why wait until Thursday to pass this, Congressman?
Well, we would like to be able to move much more quickly. It could be as early as Wednesday. But we've all got to get back to Washington. Many folks are reluctant to fly. The Senate is teed up to take first action. I'm in my car tomorrow morning driving back to Washington to be prepared to vote as early as Wednesday. We've got to get this done. The last time we passed one of these bills, we attempted to do it under what we would refer to as unanimous consent. But we did have a member who objected to that. So we have to anticipate that member would do this again. So we're all going to get back there and we'll pass this thing. And, hopefully it'll be enough to carry us for some time. It's a big number, Bill. I mean, these are big numbers, but it's a big problem.
And also they're considering having another crack at that apple too after this one. Dan Kildee, we'll see if you get your drive this week back to Washington. Thank you, sir, for your time today from Flint, Michigan. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. You bet.
Meanwhile, researchers, University of Washington, now releasing a brand new analysis of how some of the states could start reopening as early as the 4th of May. Those states are Vermont, West Virginia, Montana, and Hawaii. They're the lightest shades on the map you see. Ali Mokdad is with me now, professor at the University of Washington, produces the model that the White House and many others refer to. And sir, thank you for coming back. We wanted to hear on Wednesday. It got delayed to Thursday, and then on Friday, and then over the weekend. Why is this model so difficult to put together?
So the problem we had with this model, and we wanted to be a little bit conservative, is we wanted to know what are the capacity of each local health department. So when we say you can open up, how much forces they have in order to monitor the cases. And what we're doing right now, Bill, we're saying 1 case per million of the population. So a state like mine, 8 million roughly, we're talking about 8 cases per day. And if you trace them, say 10 contact 80 or 160 or 30 contact 240. And we feel comfortable that this is a conservative approach that my state could monitor 240 and trace them and check on them.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to the map that you provided for us. This is the green map. The darker the state, the longer the wait, essentially. The lighter the green, the sooner the time. I mentioned Vermont, West Virginia, Montana, and Hawaii. Is it obvious, or what are you seeing in those 4 states as of today, Doctor?
Oh, very good question. Yeah, 1, 2. It's a very good question, Bill.
Chegou a ter queimou as doenças.
To ride it out. I did.
Plus, it's a function of the number of cases they will have to deal with and how much workforce they can do. So West Virginia, a population of less than 2 million, we're talking about 2 cases a day that they have to trace them.
Okay, the second wave will include the following states then: the Dakotas, Nebraska, Utah, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. When you put these states up there, what does that tell the people living there about the state of normalcy that they can assume on, say, May 4th or May 11th on your map?
So what we're telling people that the infection level that's happening in your own state at a level right now that you can move to a containment stage. And then now you have to monitor through your public health surveillance, but you can start releasing some of your workforce, and you have to do it, as we talked before, in waves, but you are ready to do it because we believe you're capable to monitor so many cases at that time.
Okay, so some of these models contributed to shutting the country down. I know the amount of pressure you've been under to try and help reopen things, because we're using your information to figure out when we can go back to work again and when we can go back to school again. But your models show that the peak happened 5 days ago. Do you stand by that now?
Yes, I still stand by the worst is behind us. And yes, the peak has happened for us as a country, yes. And Bill, listen, there is a lot of debate here and we have to be very careful what we are putting out. There are people out there who are saying, if you want to build a building of 50 floors, I need everything today before I start building. What we are saying, can we start with the basement right now? We have enough to start the basement. And then when we have resources, we can go the first floor, second floor, third floor, and so on. We have to start. We have certain industries, Bill, that are concerning for us right now. Our food industry, our food security is at stake. You and I talked about the fishing industry here. We have fishermen, 10,000 that we need to roll out of Seattle, and this is a good source for food. We need to do it right. We need to start rolling our economy. We need to make sure that we don't damage more people out there. I hear people I told you, some of my friends lost their jobs. It's a big debate for us, but we want to provide the best information to start rolling the economy out.
Ali Mokhtar, let's check in later in the week and see what your models tell us then. Thank you, sir, for your time for the University of Washington today. Thank you.
Thank you.
The 500,000 test capacity, which we have just acquired, is equal to the total amount of testing which has been completed by 4 of the top 5 states in America combined.
That's Larry Hogan, Maryland's governor, with us last Friday, announcing just today the state had 500,000 test kits from South Korea. We'll get an update on antibody testing, which could be key to when things can reopen. Also, nations around the world now targeting China over Beijing's role in the pandemic. How can the globe take on this economic powerhouse to the tune of trillions of dollars? We'll dig into that. And the last cruise ship still at sea, finally pulling into port. How long these passengers spent on board and on the water.